From the Surveyor Newsroom in sunny Miami, welcome to the Miami Real Estate Podcast, your home for expert insight on all things Miami real estate. I'm your host, Omar DeWint. Let's get started. Welcome back to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Omar DeWint, Communications Executive here at Surveyor Real Estate. Joining me on the other line today is Richard Ross, CEO of Quinn Residences, here for a conversation and outlook on the rental market for 2024. Richard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Omar. Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Always great to get insight from professionals throughout the various sectors of the real estate industry. The rental market and rental analysis isn't really a topic that we've covered in detail yet, surprisingly. But I think as it's been widely known in the news, and I think most people in the U.S. know, the rental market, rental developments, rental condominiums and whatnot have been growing and growing. And I think that's something that would be well worth getting your insight on. So without further ado, I guess, Richard, first, if you could tell us a little bit about Quinn Residences and your role, your day-to-day in the company, just to kind of set the table for our audience.
Absolutely. So, Omar, we are a institutionally backed owner, operator, developer of purpose-built, dedicated rental communities, and I'll talk about that, what that means in a minute. We currently own 5,200 homes throughout 39 communities in primarily the southeastern United States. That's the Carolinas, Georgia, Tennessee, Florida. Although we don't get down to South Florida, we sort of start, let's say, the I-4 corridor, right? Tampa over to Melbourne. We don't typically play in South Florida. There's a lot of rental dynamics there that and price points that are kind of out of our reach. What we focus on are starter homes. So we build entire communities. Think about a subdivision for your listeners out in Kendall or Fort Lauderdale, Pembroke Pines, right? 250 homes. We have separately amenitized, meaning our own amenities, pool, clubhouse, dog park, playground, and every home is for rent. And these are starter homes. So the price points anywhere from today, probably 300 to 350,000 per home. Granite countertops, stainless appliances, technology package. That's what we offer our residents.
Excellent. And so tell me a little bit about then, so you mentioned the price being, in the 350,000 starter homes, but the rental, you're obviously, what are the rentals
Sure.
going
So
for?
our average rent today across the portfolios is like $2,100 a month, and that is for like an 1,800 square foot home, 3 bedroom, 3 and 4 bedroom homes.
Okay, so let's kind of set the table here on the rental market. What have you seen? I know you have over 4 decades of experience, and you've been with Quinn for many years. But tell me about what are you seeing with regards to rental condominiums in general? I mean, there's been I think a obvious uptick, but what have you seen there?
Yeah, so let's put it in perspective, right? I think it's helpful for the audience to understand, and I'm going to use some data here nationwide. There's about 132 million households in the United States. Of that, about a third, 45 million, are rentals, and that's everything. That means homes, condominiums, mobile homes, VRBO, Airbnb, apartments, right? So about a third of those households are for rent. In our business, which are single family rentals, right? So 3 and 4 bedroom homes, that's about 11%. So about 14 million homes. And what you're seeing today in the market, the rental market overall, and I know you're seeing it in South Florida, is that there's a huge shortage of homes in this country, right? So overall, depending on who you believe, stat wise, somewhere between 4 and 6 million home shortage, meaning people who want a home but can't find one. And that's
Sure.
getting worse. That's getting worse. So through 2023, there were about 1,800,000 households formed in this country, and we only built 1.5 million homes. So that 4 million is growing, right? It's getting worse. Coupled with the mortgage rate, right? The home price appreciation and the mortgage rate. So home prices have gone up, as you well know, in South Florida over the
Mhm.
last 3 to 4 years out with the pandemic considerably. And the cost of owning that home because of mortgage rates, whether they're 6.5, 7%, mortgage rates have more than doubled in the last year and a half. So that makes rentals a lot more affordable. In our particular instance, we're about 46 to 50% cheaper to rent one of our homes, same exact home, than to buy it. So if you were to buy one of our homes, when you consider the mortgage payment, insurance, property taxes, and maintenance, which we provide 100% of, we're about 50% less. So I mentioned our rents are about 2,000, 2,100 a month. To own one of our homes is over $3,000 a month. So there's your differential, and that's what's driving the rental market today.
Sure, and I think there's probably, I mean, similarities in South Florida, obviously at a higher cost, but the ratio there, I guess, the rents down here in the urban district, on the central business district, probably you're going to start anywhere near $3,000 just for a one bedroom, apartment easily. And I think, but even to own those, your mortgage is gonna be higher, especially with the interest rates and the way things are going. So you'll see a big down here. I know you mentioned your portfolio isn't down here, but there's been a huge uptick, and not so much in the single family home rental communities, but in the rental condominium um
Yeah,
communities.
and
And so
I do follow the data because I'm from South Florida, born and raised. And so we do follow the data, even though we don't operate in those markets. And the rents have gone up considerably, right? You got all these people from New York. I mean, you heard the big announcements, all the
yeah,
big hedge funds are moving down there because of tax benefits and such. And rents have gone up considerably. I know in Brickell and other areas. Having said that, to own in those areas has gone up considerably as well. And I think the data still
right,
shows it's cheaper to rent than to own. Um, Not to mention all the flexibility. That's what's driving a lot of our resident preferences are flexibility, right? If
sure.
you can't own a home, you want flexibility to be able to move to different parts of the city or area or out of the area to another area.
Right. And so tell me about you're following the data. I think we've seen that there was obviously a big uptick, a huge spike over COVID with the crunch on the inventory down here for rental prices were crazy. You had to kind of go in definitely at asking, above asking. In some cases, people were offering several months in advance in the 2020 2021 time frame just to lock in a rental. Prices kept going up. This year, they kind of leveled out a little bit, but it's a little bit more competitive, but or healthier, let's say on the renter side. But what do you see moving into 2024? Are you going to see more of that? Do you think rental prices will go back up, stay the same, go down, or what are you seeing?
So I would say for 24 and beyond, let's say 24 to 26, there's a lot of supply coming on in South Florida and other metropolitan areas, meaning rents go up, people are like, "Oh, let's build more," right? And that's
Mhm.
happening in many areas. Um, and interest rates have started to come down a little bit, right? I think you've seen in the last couple of weeks, the Fed has said as early as yesterday or Wednesday, we're not going to raise rates anymore. We're going to probably lower rates next year. So I think a couple of things are going to happen. There's going to be more supply. um, Owners of apartments, condos, whatever the rental supply is, are going to want to keep their residents, right? Because it's very expensive to have somebody move out of an apartment or a rental, and you got to fix it up, you got to paint it, you got to replace carpet. That all costs money. So it's cheaper and better for the owner, the landlord, to keep those residents, as we say in the industry, keep the heads in the beds. That
Right.
means that there's going to be opportunity. Rents aren't going to go up 10, 12, 15%. It's going to be because there's more supply and because owners are going to want to keep renters. I don't think you're going to see the significant increases in rent. And you're probably going to see some concessions, meaning 1 month free, right? Or people aren't going to have to pay 3 months in advance. There's going to be a lot more competition. I'm speaking now about what I know about South Florida. Certainly in the broader Southeast markets, you're already seeing that, particularly in apartments, right? In sort of high-rise apartments like Brickell. You're seeing
Sure.
that in Atlanta, you're seeing that in Charlotte, you're seeing that in the major markets in the Southeast, where owners are making concessions and keeping the people in their units.
Right. So some flexibility or options, I guess, for the current tenants now, with the goal of the landlords being to keep the heads in the beds, as you say.
Correct.
So what about talk to me about the rental experience, and how Quinn approaches it, and maybe generally speaking, trends that you see in the market. How are institutional companies like yourself and others working to sort of attract renters or just to redefine the experience?
Yeah. So I'll give you some data from our experience. I think first and foremost, the American dream has kind of changed, right? Post-war, people my age, right? I'm the end of the boomers. Um, uh, let me see if I get my letters right. Gen X and millennials. There was always this thing. Well, I want to own a home. I want to own a home. And interestingly enough, about a third of our residents live with us because it's cheaper right now, but eventually they want to own a home. They live with us because it's cheaper, or they don't know where they want to buy, or they can't come up with a down payment, or they don't have the credit score to be able to do that. That means two-thirds of our residents are what we call renters by choice. And that stems from a couple of things. And this is what we're learning um, about our current demographics. A renter by choice is there because they may want to. They live in Miami, right? They live in Brickell. They have a great job, but in 3 years they may want to move to Atlanta, or they may want to move to Denver or San Francisco. And so, if they put a significant amount of equity into a home, are they going to be able to sell that? So that's one reason, the flexibility. The other thing we're seeing is the no maintenance lifestyle, right? You own a condo, you own a home, you got to mow the lawn, you got to unclog the toilet, you got to change the water heater if it breaks. We provide all of that. So your toilet clogs, your water heater breaks, you go on an app, put in your thing, next day, we're out there, or that day we're out there to fix it instead of calling Joe the plumber and you having to pay that out of pocket. Property taxes continue to go up. So insurance, especially down there, I know all of you have seen sort of the insane increases in insurance premiums. Obviously, we provide all that. We cover the property taxes, we cover the insurance, we cover the maintenance. So the maintenance-free lifestyle is something that's very attractive to today's renter. The other thing we're seeing is a big percent of our residents, almost a third, are empty nesters, right? Folks who have sold their home, made a bunch of money, and either they're following their grandchildren. This is probably true in South Florida, right? They don't want to live with the grandchildren for sure, and I don't think the parents of the grandchildren want mom and dad living downstairs, but they want to be 3, 5 miles away or 10 miles away so that they can come visit. So there's a lot of that, and that is all driving the rental experience. So it's the no maintenance lifestyle and it's the flexibility. The other thing we're doing is in our homes, and a lot of owners, major owners who are in this for the long haul, technology is big in our homes. So when we build a community, we put a basic tech package in, which means you get a Ring camera on the door, right? So you can see the Amazon guy. Obviously, thermostats that can be controlled remotely. We also put leak detectors in certain spots. So a leak detector under in the laundry room, a leak detector under the water heater, a leak detector under the kitchen sink. So if any leaks happen, you go to work that morning and the washer springs a leak or the water heater fails, we get an email so that your furniture isn't destroyed or your clothes, your house is not sitting there all day with a leak. You can go on vacation and set the thermostat, for put the AC on, 80, but when you're coming home, set it back to 72, those kinds of things. We put EV chargers in the garage, right? All of our homes have a fenced backyard and a garage, typically. So if somebody has any electronic vehicle and they want a charger, we'll install that for them so that they can charge their vehicle in the garage. We've done solar on one community and are rolling it out on eventually on all of our communities where we've taken advantage of some of the infrastructure tax incentives, and people really like that option. So not only does it save them about 20% on their electric bill, but it's a feel good thing, right? They live in a
Right.
community that's solar. So those are all things that we're doing to attract sort of the modern renter, if you will.
Right, and things that I guess the renters will come to expect, a modern renter, as you say, its conveniences, amenities, and sustainable practices. So I think that's great. What about what? So you mentioned something interesting there. So a good percentage of your clientele are renters by choice. What do you see playing off of that American dream moving forward? Like we talked about for 2024, yes, renters will have more opportunity, but what do you see as a more 5 year, 10 year? Or what does the data tell you? Do you think there's going to be less people buying homes, more people renting, or what does your crystal ball tell you?
Well, my crystal ball is not always right, Omar. I'll tell you that. If it was, I would be laying on a beach in somewhere and not be on this podcast. Having said that, here's what I think is happening. In the last since World War II, it's been very consistent. About two-thirds of the people in this country own their home. That's actually post-COVID or during the pandemic gone up. I think it was 64 and now it's 66. So, but somewhere around two-thirds of the people own their homes, meaning the other third rent and have always rented. Those numbers are pretty consistent. Prior to the pandemic, rent was always about 15% cheaper than owning, right? Because the owner of the rental is putting out the down payment essentially. And when you buy a home, you're putting out the down payment. Obviously, that's in the pandemic and post-pandemic gone to 40 to 50% cheaper. That will level out. Probably back, maybe it never goes back to 15% cheaper, but maybe it's about 20% cheaper. But I also think this no maintenance lifestyle is very attractive. So I would tell you, as interest rates come back, they're not going back to 3%. I don't think mortgage rates are ever going to be at 3% in my life, in the rest of my lifetime. Probably not in yours. You're considerably younger than me. Maybe a mortgage rate settles around 5 or 6%. Um, so, given that background, I think it'll be less people want to own a home. I'll use my. I have four daughters, and I polled them. Right, they're all millennials, um, and they've said to me, "Dad, why would I own a house? I got to save up 20% down payment. Let's just say a starter home's $400,000, right? So I got to save up 80 grand, plunk it down. Then I gotta mow the lawn and, do all the maintenance. And
Mhm.
they have friends who in the great financial crisis of, 2008, 9, whatever, lost everything in their home, right? Now people have made a lot of money. Um, but my daughters, they want to travel, they want to use their money other than to own a home. So I think that two-thirds over the next 10 years will probably start to diminish a little bit. I don't know that everybody wants to own a home like my generation did. That was your goal. Go to college, whatever, get an education, whether it's college or whatever, get a good job, find a partner, buy a home. That was sort of the dream. I think that's changing.
Right, the white picket fence, the dog, and the two and a half kids. What about but historically, on the other side, owning is a great way for wealth preservation or historically, or to build wealth, let's say, over generations. What alternatives are you seeing with the millennials, with Gen Zs? If the no maintenance lifestyle and the convenience of renting, right, are they turning to other channels to generate wealth?
Yeah, I think owning a home for the long term has always been a great investment, right? We know that. That's demonstrated by all the data. Obviously, we're at a very high level now, right? Homes are more expensive than they've ever been. People have really low mortgages, so there's this locked in. I think 85% of mortgages are under 4%. So, like, why would I sell my
Wow.
house, right?
Right,
Unless I'm going to sell my house, pull all that money out, put it in the bank or invest it. And we'll talk about what I think people are doing with that and get a 7% mortgage, right? So if they're going to sell, they're going to put their money in other things and they might rent for all the reasons we've talked about. What are they doing? I mean, it used to be crypto was the big thing, right? I'm going to put my money in Bitcoin and make, a fortune. Obviously with the SBF stuff and, all of that, maybe
right.
crypto. But I think investing is something that in the stock market and other investments, gold, the precious metals, and I think a lot of youngsters would rather spend their money, on travel, right?
Sure.
I want to go
Experiences.
see Antarctica, right? I want to go to Europe. I want to experience things more than stick around and mow the lawn. And I still think the two dogs, is something because we every one of our. It's interesting in our homes. There's more pets than children, like by 2 to 1.
Wow.
Our
Wow.
average is we have, I'm looking at the data here, half a child per home. So a 3 bedroom, there's less than one child, but there's 1.5 pets. So that tells you
All right.
almost 3 to 1.
Interesting. And so, now turning this to South Florida, back to South Florida a little bit. So I think, what do you see for another homeowner, let's say, as the investor historically, especially here in South Florida, the individual investor, um, what are you seeing for them, with the rental market here, in South Florida?
Well, it's interesting that you say that, Omar, because I mentioned earlier, right, about 11, 30, a third of the homes in this country are rentals. You would think these big companies, because you've been reading about it in the media, these giant public
Right.
companies, people like Quinn, they own less than 1% of the rentals. So to your point,
Wow.
most of the rentals in this country are people who own less than 9 homes. So it's it's mom and pops, right? It's a family who maybe they own 3 homes in Hialeah or one in Coral Gables and one in Pembroke Pines, and they've rented them out. Either they bought them as investment properties or they bought them as their starter home and have now moved up. And instead of selling that home, they're renting it. So I think obviously a big population of what we call mom and pop, but people who own less than 10 rental homes because it's a great income stream. It's a great way to build again to invest for retirement. Um, that market is not going away. And with the differential today, meaning it's much cheaper to own, um, much cheaper to rent, sorry, than own. I think folks are, and if you have a 3% or 4% mortgage and you want to move, maybe you move up, maybe you do take on a higher mortgage, but you keep that old house, that lower mortgage, and you rent it. It's a bit of a pain in the rear, right? Managing that. I mean, we do this for a living, but
Sure.
let's just say, Omar, you have 3 rental homes. Your resident, your tenant's going to call you and say, "Hey, Omar, the AC just shut off, and it's August in
Right.
Miami." So you're going to have to figure out how you get that AC fixed. There are management companies that do that. But overall, I think the rental business for even small owners I'm very bullish on that for the next, 5 years because of how
Nice.
expensive homes are and how mortgage rates are still very high.
So, let's talk about, the realtors. I mentioned to you when we were off mic. A big part of our audience is real estate professionals. How does Quinn work with realtors, and are realtors incentivized, not incentivized to work with rental communities such as yourself?
Yeah. So we work with sort of realtors, I'll call them also brokers, in two
Sure.
ways. One is we do not do scattered site, meaning there are a lot of big companies out there, public companies, Invitation Homes, America's Home for Rent, Tricon are the three big ones that buy scattered site homes, meaning they'll buy three homes in some neighborhood in Hialeah or four homes in Miami Gardens, right? And that's a place for realtors to build relationships with those companies if they have, potential homes for sale. Because of this high mortgage rate, um, those companies would potentially be customers for realtors. We and how rental owners use realtors is if they have a client who wants to rent a home for a year, 2, 3 years. Our average resident, by the way, stays almost 3 years as opposed to an apartment where it's a year. So we can pay commissions, right, on a lease. So if a realtor brings us a resident, a potential resident, and they move in, we pay them a commission, some percentage of the rent, um, for them bringing us that resident.
Understood. So, I was gonna ask you yes, so sticking with South Florida here and Quinn, so you haven't made it this far down yet, or are there plans to come down? You mentioned that you had looked at the market, but what is it about the South Florida market that keeps you out? Because we would love to have more communities for single family homes for rent like this. We have a lot of condos, but not the houses.
Right, and I understand that, and growing up there, I mean, the issue for us in South Florida is really we look for 3 things in wanting to invest in a community. It's jobs. Clearly, South Florida has jobs and the job growth. Two, it's proximity to retail. Interestingly, and three is schools, right? The other good school systems, because even though a small percentage of our residents have children, so I would tell you when we first started out, it was always jobs. Second was schools. Now schools has become third. Proximity to retail means can you get your hair done? Can you go to Publix and get your groceries? And obviously, South Florida has all of that. The issue for us in an urban community is just cost, right? We build communities 150 to 200 homes is sort of our sweet spot. Obviously, with the with the ocean, you're not doing that on Miami Beach. You're not doing that on Brickell. You're not doing that in Coral Gables. So you have to go west. Homestead is a market we've looked at really strong because obviously there's a lot of jobs and there's still land out there to be able. I would say west of the turnpike are areas we're looking at. What's important for us is how much rent can we get for a particular home and what does it cost us to build that home? So I would not say never.
Sure.
It's just the markets need to be where we can get one a number of homes to make a community. That's 150 to 200, and the rent has to justify right the cost of those homes. So that's where we would look. Homestead out west. I don't even know
Hmm.
what you call that anymore. I remember when
Westminster.
Chrome Avenue was the boonies, and now it's like a thriving area, right?
Right. Right, right. It's like Everglades Gate. Who knows what they'll call that?
Right. And then I would say like Stewart, Jupiter,
Sure.
those are our markets we're looking at. Obviously, that's not South Florida
Right.
anymore. But that's what I would tell you about the South Florida area. Now, there
Yeah, it
are
makes sense. Things are moving west and north.
right west
Sorry. Go.
and north, but in the metro sort of Miami, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale area, it's really hard. Now, these bigger companies that are what we call scattered sites, so the people who are buying one and two homes, there is an opportunity there for those type of owners to get in that market, and they are in that market.
Sure. And out of curiosity, what are hot growth markets for you? If it's not Florida, what's really moving the needle now, or any surprise markets that you've seen in the last couple of years?
So the I-4 corridor, I would say, is on fire, right? From Tampa over to really to Melbourne, right? Orlando, that whole corridor, because people are moving there who can't afford South Florida, and it's sort of more our price point. Jacksonville, very good market. Not so much the Panhandle again, because there's not a lot of big employers there. Although Pensacola is having some people are looking at Pensacola. Once you get outside of Florida, um, Savannah, Georgia, there's a big port there. So Savannah, um, obviously Atlanta, Charlotte, Raleigh. I'm now in the Carolinas. Coastal North Carolina. I don't know if you've heard the term halfbacks, but there's a lot of
No,
people who left the Northeast, moved to Florida, to South Florida, and are now feeling either priced out or whatever. So they're moving halfway back. That that's
got it.
that's how the term. So they're moving to South Carolina, North Carolina. So those markets, and then Texas. Texas is very, very popular. A lot of jobs. I'm talking Dallas, Fort Worth, Austin. Tesla's in Austin. All the tech companies are
Sure.
there, but a lot of there's a big financial employment base in Dallas, Fort Worth, and then all the way down, believe it or not, to San Antonio. So that's another corridor that's very um, profitable for owners. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana are a little tougher because again, not a lot of employment. What owners of
Sure.
rental property look for first and foremost is are there jobs? Because those are the people that can afford to pay rent.
Of course. And so winding this down, and looking ahead, what are what's the future future trends in the industry that we should look out for? What is Quinn sort of excited about, and sort of what does the future look like for this industry?
So I would tell you rental is here to stay. And as I've said, it's always been here. It's about a third. That percentage probably goes up over the next, let's say, 5 to 10 years, meaning more people will be renting than owning for all the reasons we've discussed. I think newer is better. People want, granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. They want technology, right? They want to be able to control their home. They want as much as it's ebbs and flows. They want a green home, meaning the solar is big. We do a lot of things with sort of like community gardens and beehives, and that attracts residents. But technology first and foremost, can they charge their car in the garage? Can they control the thermostat? Is it a tight home, meaning energy efficient wise? And then activities, right? What's going on in the community? Are there community activities? Um, and that's sort of quality of life things. All of those are going to drive the rental market for the next 5 to 10 years.
Excellent. So things to look out for. I think we're gonna leave it there. Richard, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to add?
No, just appreciate the opportunity to talk to you, to talk to your audience, and wish you a safe and prosperous holiday season and New Year.
Same to you. Wishing you and the entire Quinn Residences team all the best. For our listeners, once again, this was Richard Ross, CEO of Quinn Residences. Until then, remember that here in Miami, the future is always bright. Take care, folks.